The Castarian royal palace burned with an ethereal blue flame that seemed to defy physics, crawling up the crystalline walls like living creatures seeking escape. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun pressed his back against a fallen column, feeling the heat even through his combat armor's environmental controls. His heads-up display flickered with damage warnings, 30% armor integrity, primary weapon systems offline, and a nasty plasma burn that had eaten through 3 layers of protective plating across his chest. Echo Squad, this is Echo 1. Mission complete. The ambassador is secured. Fall back to extraction point Delta. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system, distorted by the electromagnetic interference from the burning palace. Marcus acknowledged the order with a double click of his comm, but his attention was drawn to movement in his peripheral vision. Through the smoke and debris, he caught sight of 3 Zealothi shock troopers advancing through what had once been the palace's grand ballroom. Their insectoid forms moved with predatory grace, compound eyes sweeping the area for survivors. The Zealothi had started this war, launching their surprise attack on the peaceful Castarian homeworld just 72 hours ago. The royal family had been their primary target. Eliminate the leadership, scatter the people, and conquest would be easy. The Federation had responded quickly, sending in special operations teams to evacuate key personnel and diplomatic staff. Marcus's squad had successfully extracted Ambassador Reeves and his staff, but the mission parameters had been clear. Human personnel only. The Castarians would have to fend for themselves. It was cold, calculated, and exactly the kind of realpolitik that kept humanity alive in a hostile galaxy. Marcus began moving toward the extraction route, his enhanced muscles compensating for the damaged servo assists in his armor. Each step sent fresh waves of pain through his chest where the plasma had scored a direct hit. The medical nanites in his bloodstream were working overtime, but they could only do so much without proper facilities. He needed to get back to the ship. That's when he heard it. A child's sob, muffled but unmistakable, coming from somewhere beneath the rubble to his left. Marcus froze, his trained mind automatically calculating distances, angles, and time. The Zealothi patrol was moving away, but they would circle back within minutes. His extraction window was shrinking, maybe 5 minutes before the shuttle would be forced to leave without him. The crying came again, and this time Marcus could make out words in broken galactic standard. Mama. Mama. Every instinct screamed at him to keep moving. This wasn't his fight. The Castarians had their own military, their own evacuation protocols. He had his orders, and those orders didn't include playing hero for alien civilians. Besides, his armor was compromised. His weapons were nearly depleted. Getting involved would be suicide. But Marcus Chun had joined the Terra Marines for a reason, and it wasn't to follow orders blindly. He'd grown up in the refugee camps on Mars after the Proxima colony fell. He knew what it was like to be a child in wartime, to watch everything you knew burn while soldiers walked past, focused on their strategic objectives. He'd sworn that if he ever had the power to make a difference, he would. Damn it, he muttered, altering his course toward the sound. His tactical display immediately lit up with warnings as he deviated from the designated extraction route. The crying led him to what had been a service corridor, now partially collapsed. Through a gap in the debris, he could see a small form huddled in an air pocket created by 2 fallen beams. Castarian physiology was humanoid enough, bipedal, roughly human-sized, though their skin had an opalescent quality that shifted between blue and purple depending on their emotional state. This one was small, maybe equivalent to a human 6-year-old, and her skin was flickering rapidly between colors, a sign of extreme distress in their species. Hey, Marcus called softly in galactic standard, not wanting to frighten her further. Hey there, little one. I'm here to help. The child's large, multifaceted eyes widened as she saw him. Most species found human appearance intimidating. The forward-facing predator eyes, the exposed teeth when they spoke. But something in Marcus's tone must have reached her because she didn't retreat further into her hiding spot. Soldier, she whispered, and Marcus was surprised to hear the word in accented English. The royal family must have ensured their children learned human languages, a diplomatic courtesy that now seemed heartbreakingly optimistic. That's right. I'm a soldier. My name is Marcus. He assessed the debris blocking her escape. His armor's strength enhancement could move it, but not quietly. What's your name? Liera, she replied, tears streaming down her face. Liera Thes Costari. Marcus's blood ran cold. Costari was the royal family name. This wasn't just any child. This was one of the princesses, one of the primary targets the Zealoty death squads were hunting. His mission parameters had just become infinitely more complicated. Okay, Liera, I'm going to get you out of there, but I need you to be very quiet. Can you do that for me? She nodded, clutching something to her chest, a small, holographic projection device that flickered with family images. Marcus's heart clenched as he recognized the formal portrait. King Theron, Queen Alara, and their 3 daughters. The king was already confirmed dead, having died in the first wave of attacks while buying time for others to escape. Marcus gripped the largest piece of debris and slowly began to shift it. His armor's servos whined in protest, damage warnings flashing insistently. The plasma burn on his chest felt like someone was pressing a hot iron against his ribs. But inch by inch, the beam moved. A sound made him freeze, the distinctive chittering of Zealoty communication. They were coming back, faster than anticipated. Marcus's mind raced through options. He could leave the child, make it to extraction, live to fight another day. Or he could stay, probably die, but maybe, just maybe, save one innocent life. It wasn't really a choice. Liera, I need you to climb out now, he whispered urgently. We have to move fast. The little princess squeezed through the gap he'd created, her small form trembling. Up close, Marcus could see the royal sigil glowing faintly on her ceremonial dress, nanofiber weaving that would identify her to any scanner. She was a walking target. Can you run? He asked. She nodded bravely, though he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. How long had she been trapped there? How long since she'd seen her family? Marcus scooped her up instead, ignoring the screaming protest from his damaged armor. Hold on tight, and whatever happens, don't let go. He ran. The palace layout was burned into his memory from mission briefing, but the damage had changed everything. Corridors were blocked, walls had collapsed, and fires had spread in unpredictable patterns. Marcus's tactical computer worked overtime, plotting new routes as fast as obstacles appeared. Behind them, the chittering grew louder. The Zealoty had found the disturbed debris. Echo 1, this is Echo 3. Marcus gasped into his comm. Situation has changed. I have a high-value civilian, requesting immediate evac assistance. Static filled his ear for a long moment before Rodriguez responded. Negative, Echo 3. Shuttle is launching in 90 seconds. You're on your own. Marcus felt Liera's arms tighten around his neck. She'd understood enough of that. It's okay, he lied. I know another way out. He burst through a service door onto an external balcony. The capital city stretched out below them, a nightmare landscape of fires and energy weapon exchanges. The palace sat on a hill overlooking everything, a defensive advantage that now left them exposed. The shuttle's engines roared to life in the distance. Marcus watched as only ride off this planet preparing to leave. In his arms, Liera whimpered. Are they leaving us? She asked in that heartbreaking mix of child's innocence and war's harsh education. No, Marcus said firmly. We're just taking a different path. He activated his armor's emergency beacon, a last resort measure that would broadcast his position to any friendly forces, but also to every Zealoty within 50 kilometers. It was military suicide, but maybe someone would investigate the signal after the fighting died down. Maybe they'd find Liera alive. Soldier Marcus? Liera's voice was small. Are we going to die? He looked down at her trusting eyes and made a decision that would have made his drill instructors apoplectic. He pulled off his helmet, letting her see his face, scarred, sweaty, but human. Not today, little princess. I promise. The Zealoty burst onto the balcony, weapons raised. Marcus counted 6, no, 7. His sidearm had maybe 20 shots left. His armor was failing. By any tactical assessment, he was already dead. But Marcus Chun had made a promise, and Marines kept their promises. He set Liera down behind a decorative pillar, pressing his sidearm into her small hands. The safety's off. Point and squeeze if anything gets past me. Don't stop squeezing until the mag runs dry. She nodded solemnly, understanding far too much for her age. Marcus turned to face the Zealoty, pulling his combat knife, the last weapon he had that didn't require power. Come on then, he growled, settling into a combat stance despite the agony in his chest. Let's dance. The first Zealothy charged, mandibles clicking in anticipation of an easy kill. It had counted on facing a wounded, exhausted human. It hadn't counted on facing a protector. Marcus moved with the fluid grace that came from years of training and muscle memory that transcended species. His knife found a gap in the Zealothy's neck armor, cyan blood spurting across the ornate balcony tiles. He rolled with the momentum, coming up inside the reach of his second attacker, using its own body as a shield against the other's plasma fire. Behind him, Liera's sidearm barked once, twice. One Zealothy stumbled, clutching its compound eye. The princess had inherited more than just her mother's looks, it seemed. But there were too many. Marcus felt the knife torn from his grip, felt the claws piercing his already damaged armor. His vision blurred as he grappled with two of them simultaneously, keeping their weapons pointed away from Liera's position. This was how it would end, then. Not in some glorious last stand, but bleeding out on alien marble while a child he'd just met watched him die. Then, the sky exploded with light. Drop pods slammed into the balcony like meteors, disgorging armored figures that moved with lethal precision. Plasma fire lit the air as the newly arrived soldiers carved through the Zealothy like a scythe through wheat. "Secure the package," someone shouted, and Marcus realized with dim surprise that they were speaking Casterian, not English. Strong arms lifted him, and he found himself looking into the face of a Casterian royal guard, one of the elite soldiers who'd been scattered when the palace fell. "The princess?" the guard asked urgently. "Safe," Marcus managed to croak. Behind the pillar, "Liada!" A female voice cried out, and Marcus turned his head to see Queen Alara herself, still in combat armor, rushing past him. The queen had survived. She'd been leading the resistance, Marcus realized, and his beacon had led her straight to her daughter. "Mama!" Liera's cry of joy was the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard. As the medical nanites finally overwhelmed his system and darkness claimed him, Marcus's last sight was of the reunion, mother and daughter embracing while royal guards formed a protective circle around them. Liera was pointing at him, saying something urgently to her mother. Then nothing. Marcus woke to the sound of machines breathing for him. The harsh, rhythmic wheeze of a ventilator filled his ears as consciousness returned in slow, painful waves. His throat felt like sandpaper, and when he tried to move, sharp agony lanced through his chest. The plasma burn, right? He'd taken a direct hit during the initial assault on the palace. "Easy, Sergeant. Don't try to move just yet." The voice was professional, clinical, but not unkind. A medical technician leaned over him, her face partially obscured by a surgical mask. "Human," Marcus noted with mild surprise. He'd expected to wake up in a Zealothy prison cell, if he woke up at all. "Where?" His voice came out as barely a whisper. "You're aboard the TCS Resilience in a medical bay. You've been unconscious for 4 days." The technician adjusted something on one of the monitors. "You're lucky to be alive. That plasma burn went deep, another centimeter, and it would have hit your heart. Not to mention the various lacerations, 3 broken ribs, and severe exo-armor pressure trauma. For days. The battle for Casteria would be long over by now. Either the planet had fallen, or the princess." Marcus managed to rasp out. "Is she alive and safe, thanks to you?" This voice was different, deeper, carrying the weight of command. Marcus turned his head slowly to see a man in Admiral's insignia standing at the foot of his bed. Admiral Reyes himself, commander of the 3rd Fleet. What was he doing in a medical bay, visiting a wounded sergeant? "Sir," Marcus tried to salute, but the Admiral waved him down. "None of that, son. You're in no condition for formalities." Reyes moved closer, his weathered face showing an unusual mix of emotions. Respect, concern, and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify. "Do you remember what happened after the Casterian Royal Guard arrived?" Marcus searched his fragmented memories. The balcony, the Zealothy attack, Liera behind the pillar with his sidearm. Then the drop pods, the reunion between mother and daughter, and then nothing. "Not much, sir. I saw the queen had survived, she found her daughter, and then I assume I passed out from blood loss." "You did more than pass out, Sergeant. You flatlined twice on the evac shuttle. The Casteria medical team had to perform emergency nanite transfusions just to keep you stable until you could reach our facilities. The Admiral pulled up a chair, a surprisingly informal gesture. What you might not remember is that Queen Alara refused to leave your side. She personally escorted you to the shuttle, used her own emergency medical supplies to stabilize you. She said, and I quote, "This human showed more honor in 5 minutes than most show in a lifetime. He will not die on my watch." Heat crept up Marcus's neck, though whether from embarrassment or the medications, he couldn't tell. "I was just doing what felt right, sir." "Were you?" Reyes leaned back, studying him. "Because from where I sit, you violated direct orders, abandoned your extraction route, engaged superior enemy forces with compromised equipment, and nearly got yourself killed. All for one alien child who, according to our mission parameters, wasn't your responsibility." Marcus met the Admiral's gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, she was 6 years old and crying for her mother. I don't care what species she was." To his surprise, Reyes smiled. "And that, Sergeant Chun, is exactly why I'm here." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a data pad. "This is a formal letter from Queen Alara. She's requested that you be assigned as military liaison to the Casterian royal family. Permanently." Marcus blinked, certain the medications were affecting his hearing. "I'm sorry, sir, what?" "The Zealoty have been pushed back, but the war is far from over. The Queen needs military advisors she can trust, and, apparently, you've made quite an impression. Not just on her, but on Princess Liera as well." According to the palace staff, the child has asked about Soldier Marcus every day since the incident. "But, sir, I'm just a sergeant. I'm not qualified for diplomatic." "You save the heir to the Casterian throne," Reyes interrupted. "You showed their people that humanity isn't just about cold pragmatism and strategic calculations. Do you have any idea what that's worth in terms of alliance building?" He stood, smoothing his uniform. The Casterians were wavering on deeper military cooperation. They saw us as opportunistic, only interested in what their technology could offer. Your actions changed that narrative. Marcus stared at the ceiling, trying to process this turn of events. "What if I refuse? Then you return to active duty once you're healed, receive a commendation for valor, and probably a promotion." Reyes paused at the door. "But I don't think you will refuse. Not after you hear the rest." "The rest?" "The Queen has intelligence suggesting the attack on Casteria wasn't random. The Zealoty were after something specific in the royal archives, ancient star charts that supposedly lead to precursor technology. If they get their hands on it." He didn't need to finish. "Precursor tech could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Liera knows the location. It's passed down through the royal line, mother to daughter, as part of their ceremonial duties. The Zealoty know this, which means they'll keep coming for her." Marcus closed his eyes. Of course, it was never just about saving one child. It never was in war. "When you're ready, Sergeant, there's a shuttle waiting to take you to the surface. The Queen has prepared quarters in the palace, or what's left of it. Your official title will be military attaché, but your real job—" Reyes paused. "Your real job is to keep that little girl alive long enough to grow up. Think you can handle that?" After the Admiral left, Marcus lay in the quiet medical bay, staring at nothing. His entire military career had been built on following orders, being part of a unit, part of something larger than himself. Now they wanted him to play bodyguard and diplomat to a child who'd already seen too much death. A soft chime drew his attention to the bedside table, where someone had placed his personal effects. Among them was a small device he didn't recognize, a Casterian data crystal. Marcus picked it up with his good hand, activating it with touch. A holographic message materialized. Liera, looking small and formal in royal robes that seemed too big for her. But her eyes were bright, alive with the resilience children somehow managed even in the darkest times. "Soldier Marcus," she began, speaking carefully in English. "Mama says you're getting better. I am glad. I wanted to say thank you for saving me. Mama says you were very brave. I think so too." She paused, fidgeting with her sleeve. "Mama also says you might come stay with us. I hope you do. The palace is very big and sometimes scary now, but I wasn't scared when you were there." The message flickered and shifted, showing Queen Alara. Where her daughter was small and uncertain, the Queen radiated controlled power, even through a hologram. "Sergeant Shun, my daughter has already said what matters most. You saved her life. But I want you to understand something more. In our culture, Such a debt cannot be simply acknowledged and forgotten. You are now family to House Costari, whether you accept the formal position or not. She leaned forward, her expression intense. I know what my admiral has told you about the precursor technology, about the ongoing threat. These are valid concerns, but I want you to know why I truly want you here. In that burning palace, when everything was chaos and death, you heard a child cry and you acted. Not because she was a princess, not because of any strategic value, but because she was a child in need. The queen straightened. That is the kind of person I want protecting my daughter. Not just from his zealothy, but from what this war might turn her into. She has lost her father, seen her home burn. She will need to be strong, yes, but I don't want her to lose her compassion. You showed her that strength and kindness can exist in the same person. That is a lesson worth more than any military strategy. The hologram faded, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He reached for the comm unit beside his bed, ignoring the protest from his injuries. The duty nurse appeared moments later. Sergeant, do you need pain management? No, Marcus said quietly. I need to speak with Admiral Reyes. Tell him I'll take the assignment. The nurse nodded and left. Marcus settled back against the pillows, already thinking through the challenges ahead. You need to learn Casterian customs, palace protocols, diplomatic niceties. You need to figure out how to be both a bodyguard and, what? A friend to a traumatized child? A mentor? His data pad chimed with an incoming message. Rodriguez and the rest of Echo Squad checking in. They'd made it out clean, completed the mission by the book. They'd even been commended for their efficiency. Marcus felt a pang of loss. That easy camaraderie of soldiers who'd faced death together. He was trading it for something uncertain, undefined. But then he remembered Liera's small hands trying to hold his sidearm steady, the determination in her young face. He remembered the sound of her crying for her mother, and how it had cut through all his training and conditioning to strike at something fundamentally human in him. 3 hours later, the medical staff cleared him for limited movement. Marcus stood slowly, testing his balance. The nanites had done their work well, but his chest still ached with every breath. A new uniform had been provided, still Terra Marines, but with the addition of a Casterian royal seal on the shoulder. Military attaché to House Costari. It had a certain ring to it. The shuttle ride to the surface was quiet. Marcus watched through the viewport as Casteria grew larger, its once pristine cities showing the scars of invasion. But there was rebuilding already beginning. Construction crews clearing debris, prefab structures going up where grand buildings once stood. The Casterians were survivors. They'd been spacefaring when humanity was still figuring out agriculture. They'd endure this too. The palace looked different in daylight, without the smoke and flames. Whole wings had been reduced to rubble, but the central structure remained, its crystalline walls catching the afternoon sun. As the shuttle descended toward the landing pad, Marcus could see figures waiting, an honor guard in formal arrangement, and 2 smaller figures standing apart. Queen Alara stood tall and regal, every inch the warrior queen who'd rallied her forces in the darkest hour. Beside her, dwarfed by her mother's presence, but trying hard to match her posture, was Liera. The moment the shuttle's ramp lowered, the princess broke from her formal stance. "Soldier Marcus," she called out, taking a step forward before catching herself, remembering her royal training. Marcus descended slowly, his movements still stiff from the injuries. He stopped at an appropriate distance and offered a formal bow. Not the crisp military salute he was used to, but the gesture of respect Casterian culture demanded. "Your Majesty, Princess Liara, I'm honored to accept your offer of service." The queen inclined her head graciously. "The honor is ours, Sergeant Chun. Be welcome in house, Costari." But Liera, apparently, had endured all the formalities she could manage. She darted forward, wrapping her small arms around Marcus's legs in a hug that sent shooting pains through his still-healing ribs. He didn't care. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered, her voice muffled against his uniform. Marcus carefully knelt to her level, ignoring his body's protests. "I keep my promises, remember?" She nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Mama says you're going to stay with us now. I can show you my room. And the garden, well, part of it is burned, but the Jula flowers are growing back. They always come back, Mama says, no matter what." "Liera," the queen said gently. Sergeant Shun has had a long journey. Perhaps we should let him rest first. It's all right, Your Majesty, Marcus said, finding himself smiling despite everything. I like to see the flowers that always come back. As Liera took his hand and began chattering about the palace layout, her favorite hiding spots, and which kitchen staff made the best treats, Marcus caught the queen's eye. Alara mouthed a silent thank you before following them into the palace. The walls might be scarred and the halls echoing with too much absence, but there was life here still. Stubborn, resilient life that refused to be extinguished. Later that evening, after Liera had finally been convinced to let him rest, Marcus stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Not the same balcony. That section of the palace was gone. But the view was similar if one ignored the pillars of smoke still rising from some districts. It's overwhelming at first, Queen Alara said, joining him. She traded her formal robes for practical military attire. Even in peacetime, she remained a soldier. The weight of being responsible for one so young in times like these. I'm not trying to replace her father, Marcus said quietly. No, you couldn't if you tried. Theron was unique. She gazed at the city lights. But Liera doesn't need another father. She needs someone who can teach her to navigate the world that's coming. A harder world than the one she was born into. And you think a human grunt is the right teacher? Alara smiled slightly. I think a man who risked everything for a crying child, who gave her his weapon and told her to fight, who stood against impossible odds. Yes, I think that man has much to teach. She turned to face him directly. But I need to know you understand what you've accepted. The zealothy will come again. If not for the precursor maps, then for revenge. For the symbolic victory of killing the last heir of Kostari. And there are others, factions within our own government who see Liera as either a symbol to be controlled or an inconvenience to be removed. Palace intrigue and assassination attempts, Marcus said dryly. Sounds like a typical Tuesday in human politics. This isn't a joke, Sergeant. I know. Marcus straightened, his expression serious. I've read the intelligence briefs. I know the risks. But that little girl trusts me, and you're trusting me with her life. I don't take that lightly. Good. Alara moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Liera has nightmares. Almost every night since the attack. The palace healers say it's normal trauma response, but she hesitated, showing vulnerability for the first time. Sometimes she calls for you. Says the soldier promised to keep her safe. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. I'll be there. After the queen left, Marcus remained on the balcony, letting the cool night air clear his head. Somewhere in the palace, a little princess was probably fighting sleep, afraid of what her dreams might bring. Tomorrow, he'd start learning the 1,000 protocols and customs that came with his new position. He'd coordinate with palace security, establish defensive positions, analyze threat assessments. But tonight, he had a different duty. He found Liera's quarters easily enough. The 2 royal guards outside were a fairly clear indicator. They nodded respectfully as he approached. Is the princess asleep? He asked. Attempting to, sir, one replied. But we heard movement a few moments ago. Marcus knocked softly. Princess? It's Marcus. May I come in? There was a scurrying sound, then the door opened a crack. Liera peered out, her large eyes reflecting the hallway light. I'm supposed to be sleeping. Me too. But sometimes sleep is hard to find. Mind if I sit for a while? She opened the door wider, revealing a room that was both heartbreakingly royal and touchingly childish. Formal portraits hung next to drawings she'd made. An ornate bed was covered in stuffed animals, most showing signs of hasty repair after the attack. Liera climbed back into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. Mama says you're going to live here now. That's right. Marcus pulled a chair close to the bed. Is that okay with you? She nodded quickly. Will you teach me to fight like you do? If your mother approves, yes. But fighting is just a tool, Liera. The important thing is knowing when to fight and when to find another way. Is that why you saved me? Because it was the right time to fight. Marcus considered his words carefully. I saved you because every person, no matter how small, deserve a chance to grow up. To see those flowers come back in the garden. Liera was quiet for a moment. Then, in a smaller voice, the zealothy killed Papa. They tried to kill me and Mama. Will they come back? There was no point in lying to her. Children in war zones developed an uncanny ability to detect adult deceptions. They might, but that's why I'm here now, to make sure they don't succeed. Promise? I promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. Marcus leaned forward slightly. But I need you to promise me something too. When things get scary, and they might, I need you to trust me and follow my instructions. Can you do that? Like on the balcony when you gave me your gun? Exactly like that. Liera extended her small hand, pinky finger raised. Pinky promise? Marcus smiled, wrapping his much larger pinky around hers. Pinky promise. She settled back into her pillows, looking more relaxed. Will you stay until I fall asleep? Of course. As her breathing gradually deepened and her grip on her favorite stuffed animal loosened, Marcus kept watch. This wasn't what he'd imagined when he'd joined the Marines. There was no glory in sitting beside a child's bed, no medals for chasing away nightmares. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the greatest victories weren't won on battlefields, but in moments like this, proving that compassion could survive even in the darkest times. His comm unit vibrated silently. A message from Rodriguez. Heard about your new assignment, Hamano. Babysitting duty? Really? Marcus typed back one-handed. It's more than that. Yeah? How do you figure? He looked at Liera's peaceful face, then at the city beyond her window, where rebuilding continued even in the darkness. Because sometimes keeping one light burning is how you hold back all the dark. Rodriguez's response was just a thumbs-up emoji, but Marcus knew his old squad mate understood. They'd all joined for their own reasons, but they stayed because of moments when they could make a difference. As the night wore on, Marcus maintained his vigil. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, learning palace protocols, establishing security routines, beginning Liera's defensive training. There would be politics to navigate, threats to assess, and the constant weight of knowing that failure meant not just his own death, but the loss of this brave, bright child who'd already survived so much. But for now, in this quiet moment, he simply kept watch. A human soldier in an alien palace, guarding a princess who called him friend, proving with every breath that some things transcended species and politics and the cold calculations of war. Some things were simply right. When Queen Alara checked in an hour later, she found them both asleep. Liera curled up with her stuffed animals, and Marcus dozing in the chair, one hand resting on his sidearm out of pure instinct. She smiled softly and draped a blanket over the soldier's shoulders before retreating. In the morning, palace staff would gossip about the human warrior who'd conquered the princess's nightmares. But for now, there was only peace, fragile, temporary but real nonetheless. 6 months had passed since Marcus Chun traded his position in Echo Squad for the ornate halls of the Casterian Palace. The seasons had changed, bringing the purple-tinged rains that turned the royal gardens into a riot of bioluminescent blooms. Liera had grown 2 inches, lost a tooth, and learned to disassemble and reassemble a pulse pistol blindfolded. The nightmares came less frequently now, though they never fully disappeared. Marcus stood in the palace training courtyard, watching as the young princess executed a perfect forward roll, coming up with her training blade in guard position. Her form was excellent. She'd inherited her mother's natural grace and augmented it with human practicality, where Casterian martial arts emphasized flowing movements and energy redirection. Marcus had taught her Earth's more direct approaches. The combination was proving remarkably effective. Again, he instructed, circling her slowly. But this time, imagine your opponent is taller. How does that change your angle of attack? Liera adjusted her stance, eyes focused with the kind of intensity that still surprised him in one so young. She moved through the sequence again, this time aiming her strikes higher, compensating for an imagined height difference. Better. But you're telegraphing your intentions. See how your shoulder dips before each strike? A trained opponent will read that. Like you read the minister yesterday? Liera asked with a grin, referencing an uncomfortable council meeting where Marcus had intercepted what appeared to be an innocent handshake, but was actually an attempt to plant a tracking device on the princess. Exactly like that. People give away their intentions in 1,000 small ways. Your job is to see them while hiding your own. A soft chime interrupted them. The perimeter alert Marcus had insisted on installing. Someone was approaching the private training area. Liera immediately shifted position, placing herself where Marcus had taught her provided the best defensive options while maintaining escape routes. The fact that a 7-year-old moved with such tactical awareness was both a source of pride and profound sadness for her instructor. "Stand down, little warrior," Queen Alera's voice carried across the courtyard. "It's only me." Liera relaxed, but didn't completely lower her guard until Marcus gave a subtle nod. Even with her mother, she'd learned to verify. Trust, but verify. Another human concept that had proven valuable in the Byzantine world of palace politics. "Your Majesty," Marcus bowed slightly. "We weren't expecting you until the afternoon session." "Plans change," Alera replied, her tone suggesting this wasn't a social visit. "Liera, darling, would you practice your forms while I speak with Sergeant Chen?" The princess looked between them, her expression showing she knew she was being excluded from something important. But she learned when to push and when to comply. "Yes, Mama." As Liera moved to the other side of the courtyard, beginning the flowing movements of traditional Casterian sword work, Alera stepped closer to Marcus. "We have a problem. The Zealoty? I wish. They at least have the courtesy to attack openly." She produced a small hollow projector, activating it to show a familiar face. Minister Vorik, one of the more vocal opponents of the Human Alliance. He's been in communication with off-world elements. My intelligence suggests he's planning something during tomorrow's memorial ceremony. Marcus studied the data, scrolling beside the minister's image. Encrypted communications, suspicious fund transfers, and meetings with known mercenary groups. "You think he's making a move against Liera? Against both of us. With the Queen and heir gone, the succession becomes contested. Vorik's nephew has a distant claim to the throne." Alera's expression hardened. "I need to know you're prepared for what might come. With respect, Your Majesty, I've been preparing for this since day one." "Liera's security is—" "No," Alera interrupted. "I mean, are you prepared for what you might have to do? Defending against the Zealoty is one thing. But tomorrow, you might have to act against Casterians. My own people. Can you do that?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Anyone who threatens Liera is my enemy. I don't care what flag they fly or what species they are. Even if it means killing in front of her, she's already seen too much violence. Sometimes the most merciful thing is to end violence quickly and decisively. But I'll do everything I can to keep her from seeing it." Alera nodded slowly. "The memorial ceremony can't be canceled or postponed. It would show weakness. But I can assure you have backup. Captain Thren and her guard unit are absolutely loyal." "No." Marcus surprised himself with the firmness of his refusal. "Extra security will just confirm that we know something. Let them think we're complacent. Besides, in a crowd, more guards just mean more potential infiltrators. You're suggesting we walk into a trap with just standard security? I'm suggesting we let them think we're walking into a trap. There's a difference." Marcus glanced at Liera, who was now incorporating some of the moves he'd taught her into her traditional forms. The synthesis was remarkable. "Your daughter is stronger than you think. If something happens, she won't panic. No child should have to be that strong." "No, they shouldn't. But she is." Marcus pulled out his tactical pad, beginning to sketch out the memorial venue. "Ils what he propose?" They spent the next hour refining the plan, identifying positions, escape routes, and contingencies. Through it all, Liera continued her practice, occasionally glancing their way but never interrupting. When they finished, she was perspiring despite the cool morning air, her form beginning to waver from exhaustion. "That's enough for today," Marcus called out. "Cool-down exercises, then breakfast." As Liera began her stretches, she asked casually, "Are we going to be attacked tomorrow at the memorial?" Both adults froze. Alera started to speak, likely to offer reassurance, but Marcus held up a hand. The princess deserved truth, delivered appropriately. "What makes you think that?" he asked. "Mama only comes to morning practice when something's wrong. You've been checking your weapons more than usual. And Minister Vorik smiled at me yesterday. He never smiles at me." Liera continued her stretches as if discussing assassination attempts was perfectly normal conversation, which Marcus realized with a pang it had become. "There might be trouble," he admitted, "but we'll be ready. Should I wear the dress with the hidden armor weave?" "Yes." "And the hairpins?" Marcus smiled slightly. The hairpins were actually miniaturized emergency beacons and smoke dispensers, designed to look like traditional Casterian ornaments. "Those two." Liera nodded matter-of-factly, then brightened. Can we stop at the juice vendor on the way home? The one with the purple fruits. The tonal shift would have been jarring if Marcus hadn't gotten used to it. Children, he'd learned, had a remarkable ability to compartmentalize. Deadly serious one moment, focused on treats the next. It was probably healthier than the way adults carry their stress constantly. If your mother approves, he said. Mama, Liera turned her most effective weapon, wide, pleading eyes, on the queen. Alara sighed dramatically. How can I refuse such a fearsome warrior? As they prepared to leave the training ground, Liera slipped her hand into Marcus's, a gesture that had become routine over the months, but never failed to affect him. Her small fingers were calloused now from weapon training, but they still carried that inherent trust that children offered so freely and adults learned to guard. Marcus, she asked as they walked, will you always keep me safe? He'd learned not to make absolute promises. The galaxy was too uncertain for that. I'll always do my best. And I'm very good at my job. I know, she said simply. That's why I'm not scared. But she should be, Marcus thought. Tomorrow would test all their preparations. Minister Vorik wasn't just ambitious. He was clever, well-funded, and had the patience to plan carefully. Whatever he had orchestrated would be designed to look like an accident or, worse, blamed on human interference. The memorial ceremony for King Theron would provide the perfect cover: crowds, emotion, distraction. That evening, Marcus ran through equipment checks in his quarters. His marine armor had been modified with Casterian shield generators, creating a hybrid system that had proven effective in several minor incidents over the months. His weapons were clean, charged, and ready. But it was the small things that might matter most. The emergency beacon sewn into Liera's dress, the smoke grenades disguised as ceremonial orbs, the blade hidden in his formal boots. A knock at his door interrupted his preparations. Enter, he called, expecting one of the guards with a security update. Instead, Liera appeared around the doorframe. I couldn't sleep. Big day tomorrow. She nodded, entering fully. She was in her nightgown, dragging her favorite stuffed animal, a earth bear Marcus had managed to have imported. She'd named it Sergeant Fuzzy, which he tried not to take personally. Want to talk about it? Marcus set aside his equipment, giving her his full attention. Do you think Papa can see us? Tomorrow, at his memorial? The question caught Marcus off guard. They'd discussed death before. Hard to avoid in their circumstances, but this was different. This was a child trying to make sense of loss and meaning. I don't know, he answered honestly. Different cultures believe different things about what happens after. What do you think? Liera climbed into the chair across from him, tucking her legs underneath her. Mama says his spirit lives in the stellar winds now. That all Casterian kings join the stars when they die. But Minister Vorik said Papa is just gone. That dead is dead. Marcus felt a flash of anger at Vorik for his cruelty, but kept it from his voice. What do you want to believe? I want to believe he's watching. That he's proud I'm learning to be strong. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But sometimes I'm scared I'll forget him. His voice. How he used to carry me on his shoulders through the garden. Then, we make sure you remember, Marcus said firmly. We tell stories. Look at pictures. Keep the good memories alive. That's how people really live on, in the hearts of those who love them. Liera seemed to consider this. Is that what you do with people you've lost? Marcus thought of friends fallen in battle, of his grandmother who'd raised him in the Mars colonies. Yes, every day. Will you tell me about them sometime? Sometime, he agreed. But tonight, you need sleep. Big day tomorrow, remember? Will you check under the bed first? For Zelethy, it was an old ritual now, one they both knew was more about comfort than actual security. Marcus made a show of checking thoroughly, even using his tactical scanner for effect. All clear, princess. As Liera settled into bed, she asked one more question. Marcus, if something happens to Mama tomorrow, will you still stay? The question hit like a physical blow. Nothing's going to happen to your mother. But if it did, Marcus knelt beside the bed, meeting her eyes at her level. I made a promise to keep you safe. That promise doesn't depend on anyone else. Understand? She nodded, seeming satisfied. Okay. Good night, Marcus. Good night, little warrior. As he returned to his quarters, Marcus found sleep elusive. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. The Memorial Plaza could accommodate 5,000 mourners, with multiple levels, ceremonial platforms, and countless places for threats to hide. He'd done what he could, positioned loyal guards, secured the primary routes, prepared contingencies. But no plan survived contact with the enemy. He thought about Liera's question. Would he stay if something happened to Alera? The answer had come without hesitation. Somewhere in the past 6 months, his mission had transformed from assignment to calling. The princess wasn't just a protective detail anymore. Family wasn't quite the right word, but it was close. His comm unit chimed softly. A message from Captain Thren. Suspicious activity near the southern entrance. 3 vehicles, diplomatic plates, but no scheduled arrivals. Marcus typed back. No positions. No intervention unless they make a move. Let them think we're unaware. The pieces were moving into position. By tomorrow night, the political landscape of Casteria might look very different. But Marcus had faced worse odds on that burning balcony 6 months ago. This time, he had advantages, preparation, allies, and, most importantly, a princess who'd learned that being small didn't mean being helpless. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it the purple-tinged light that gave Casterian mornings their otherworldly quality. Marcus was already awake, running through mental scenarios as he donned his formal uniform. The Terra Marine dress blues had been modified with Casterian elements, a visual reminder of the alliance between their peoples. Liera was quiet during breakfast, eating mechanically while her mother reviewed the ceremony schedule. The princess wore the prescribed morning attire, a deep blue dress that shimmered with hidden armor weave, her hair arranged in elaborate braids that concealed the emergency devices. She looked older than her 7 years, carrying herself with a dignity that would have made her father proud. Remember, Alera said softly, when the choir sings the anthem of ascension, we step forward 3 paces, bow to the eternal flame, then return to position, Liera finished. I remember, Mama, and if anything unusual happens, stay close to Marcus, follow his instructions without question, and activate my beacon if we're separated. The princess recited the instructions as if discussing her daily schedule. Marcus caught Alera's eye. The queen's expression was carefully controlled, but he could see the strain beneath. Sending her daughter into danger went against every maternal instinct, but showing fear would only encourage their enemies. The ride to the Memorial Plaza was conducted in armor-plated vehicles with full escort. Marcus rode with the royal family, his attention split between watching for threats and observing Liera. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, but he could see the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers occasionally traced the hidden pockets in her dress. Almost there, he said quietly. You're doing great. She gave him a small smile. I practiced being calm in the mirror this morning. Papa always said a ruler's face is their first defense. The plaza came into view, a massive circular space dominated by a crystal spire that caught and refracted light in impossible patterns. Thousands were already gathered, a sea of morning colors and bowed heads. Marcus's enhanced vision picked out the positions of uniform guards, but also noted the subtle wrongness in certain areas. Too many people standing alone. Too many hands hidden in cloaks despite the warm weather. Multiple possibles, he murmured into his comm, sectors 7, 12, and 15. Confirmed. Captain Thren's voice responded. We have eyes on. The vehicle stopped at the ceremonial entrance. Marcus exited first, scanning the immediate area before signaling the all-clear. Queen Alera emerged with practiced grace, followed by Liera. The princess's chin was raised, her small hand steady as she took her mother's arm. The crowd's murmur rose as they appeared. Genuine grief mixed with political calculation. Marcus could almost taste the various agendas in the air. They began the long walk to the central platform, ceremonial guards flanking them while Marcus stayed within arm's reach of Liera. Everything remained calm through the opening ceremonies. Speakers praised King Theron's wisdom, his courage during the first Zealoty incursions, his dedication to peace. Liera stood motionless through it all, the perfect image of royal composure. But Marcus could see the micro-expressions, the tightening around her eyes during mentions of her father, the way her breathing hitched when the royal portrait was unveiled. It was during the third speaker, Minister Vork himself, ironically, that Marcus spotted the first real sign of trouble. A figure in maintenance coveralls moving through a restricted area, heading for the environmental control stations. If someone wanted to release gas or toxins into the crowd, Maintenance worker, Sector 9. He sub-vocalized into his comm, moving to intercept. Negative. Alera's voice came through his earpiece. She'd been listening to the security channel. If you leave Liera now, it might be what they're waiting for. Thren, handle it. Marcus gritted his teeth but held position. Every instinct screamed to pursue the threat, but the Queen was right. His place was here. Target neutralized, Thren reported moments later, carrying aerosol dispensers. Non-lethal, but would have caused panic. Crowd dispersal agent. So that was the plan. Create chaos, scatter the crowd, and, in the confusion, Marcus's hand moved to his sidearm as he spotted the second phase beginning. 3 separate groups beginning to converge on the platform, their movements too coordinated to be coincidental. Multiple hostiles converging, he announced. This is it. What happened next would be burned into Marcus's memory forever. Minister Vorik was mid-sentence in his eulogy when he suddenly turned, producing a weapon from his ceremonial robes. Not aimed at the Queen. That would be too obvious. Instead, he pointed it directly at Liera. For the true succession, he shouted. Time seemed to slow. Marcus was already moving, his enhanced reflexes pushing him beyond normal human limits. He swept Liera behind him, his body becoming a shield as Vorik's weapon discharged. The plasma bolt took him high in the shoulder, spinning him half around, but his armor held. The crowd erupted in screams. The convergent groups revealed themselves as armed mercenaries, opening fire on the Royal Guard positions. Captain Thren's people responded instantly, but they were outnumbered and out of position. Down, Marcus commanded, forcing both Liera and Alera to the platform's surface. His shoulder was on fire, nanites already working to seal the wound, but he ignored it. 3 hostiles were climbing onto the platform itself, weapons raised. Marcus drew his sidearm with his good hand, the weapon feeling like an extension of his will. 3 shots, 3 bodies falling. But more were coming. Always more. Liera, smoke now, he barked. The princess didn't hesitate. She yanked the ornamental pins from her hair, triggering the concealed devices. Thick smoke billowed across the platform, providing precious concealment. Through his tactical visor, Marcus could see thermal signatures moving through the smoke. He fired twice more, dropping attackers who'd assumed the smoke would blind everyone equally. Human technology integrated with Casterian defenses, Vorik hadn't counted on that. Your Majesty, we need to move, Marcus said, hauling Alera to her feet with his good arm. Liada, grip protocol. The princess immediately grabbed onto his equipment belt, her small fingers finding the loops designed for exactly this purpose. If they had to run, she wouldn't be left behind. But before they could move, Vorik emerged from the smoke. His face was twisted with fanatic fervor, his weapon now aimed at Alera. The old ways die with you, false queen. Casteria belongs to those who remember our true strength. He never got a fire. Liera, still gripping Marcus's belt, had drawn the holdout pistol from his ankle holster. The 7-year-old princess put 2 rounds center mass into the minister who'd tried to murder her family. Vorik looked down at the spreading blood on his robes, then at the child who'd shot him. You impossible. You threatened my mama, Liera said simply, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Marcus taught me to stop threats. Vorik collapsed, his grand coup dying with him. Around the plaza, the battle was turning. The royal guards, rallied by Captain Thren, were systematically eliminating the remaining mercenaries. The crowd was fleeing in panic, but the immediate danger was passing. Marcus kept his weapon raised, scanning for additional threats, but the attack seemed to be collapsing. Mercenaries were surrendering or fleeing as they realized their leader was dead and their surprise lost. Area secure. Captain Thren's voice came through the comm, medical teams incoming. Only then did Marcus allow himself to truly feel the wound in his shoulder. The armor had prevented penetration, but the kinetic impact had done damage. His left arm was nearly useless, and he could feel blood running down inside his uniform. Marcus! Liera dropped the pistol and turned to him, her composure finally cracking. You're hurt. I've had worse, he managed, though the world was starting to gray at the edges. You did good, little warrior. Perfect shot placement. I remember to squeeze, not pull, she said, her voice small. Then, louder, medic. We need a medic. As the medical teams swarmed the platform, as the security forces established a perimeter, as Queen Alara held her daughter with shaking hands, Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd survived. More than that, Liera had proven that all their training had taken hold. When a moment came, she hadn't frozen or panicked. She'd acted. You saved us, Alara said, her royal composure cracked, but not broken. Again, Liera saved us, Marcus corrected, wincing as a medic began working on his shoulder. I just gave her the tools. The queen looked at her daughter, who was refusing to leave Marcus's side despite the medic's attempts to check her for injuries. Yes, she said softly. You did. Later, much later after the wounded were treated and the conspirators rounded up after the emergency sessions and the public addresses, Marcus found himself back in the palace medical wing. His shoulder was immobilized, but healing, the miracles of combined human and Casterian medical technology ensuring he'd have full use of it within days. Liera sat in the chair beside his bed, still in her smoke-stained dress, refusing all attempts to make her leave. She'd been quiet since the shooting, processing what had happened in her own way. I killed someone, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus considered his words carefully. This was a moment that would shape her, for better or worse. You stopped someone who was trying to kill your mother. There's a difference. Does it get easier? No, he said honestly, and it shouldn't. Taking a life should never be easy, but sometimes it's necessary to protect the people we love. Minister Vorik had a family too. A wife. Children. Yes, he did. And that's something you'll carry. But, Liera, he made his choice. He chose to point a weapon at you, at your mother. You didn't make him do that. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm glad you're okay. Me too, little warrior. Me too. As the palace settled into uneasy quiet, as investigators worked to unravel the full extent of the conspiracy, as the galaxy watched to see how Casteria would respond to this internal betrayal, a human soldier and an alien princess kept vigil together. They'd faced death and survived. They'd been forced to kill and found they could live with it. They'd proven that the bonds of chosen family could be stronger than blood, stronger than politics, stronger than the hatred that sought to divide them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Zealothi were still out there, still hunting for the precursor technology. Other ambitious ministers would see Vorik's failure and learn from it. The memorial meant to honor the dead had become a battlefield, and that would leave scars on everyone involved. But tonight, they had each other. A warrior and a child, teacher and student, protector and protected, though the lines between those roles were blurring. Liera had saved him as surely as he'd saved her, proving that courage wasn't about size or species or age. It was about standing up when standing was hard. It was about pulling the trigger when every other option was gone. It was about choosing love over fear, always and forever. As Liera finally dozed off in her chair, Marcus kept watch. His shoulder ached, his body was exhausted, but his spirit was oddly at peace. They'd won this battle. There would be others. There always were. But they'd face them as they'd faced this one. Together. 2 years had transformed Princess Liera from a frightened child into something far more complex. A 9-year-old who could discuss trade negotiations over breakfast and practice lethal combat techniques before lunch. The attack at her father's memorial had catalyzed changes that went beyond mere survival training. She'd become a symbol to her people. The princess who stood with her human protector against those who would destroy Casteria from within. Marcus watched her now as she addressed the junior diplomatic corps, her voice steady as she explained the delicate balance between maintaining sovereignty and accepting Federation aid. She wore the traditional robes of a Casterian royal, but underneath, he knew, was armor weave and enough concealed weapons to arm a small squad. Some might call it paranoia. Marcus called it practical. The key, Liera was saying, is to remember that every species brings its own strengths to an alliance. Humans offer military innovation and adaptability. Zealothi, she paused, and Marcus saw the slight tightening around her eyes, before the current conflict offered unparalleled logistics networks. We must look beyond present animosities to future possibilities. One of the young diplomats raised a hand. But, Princess, How can we consider future alliances with species actively trying to destroy us? Liera's smile was sad beyond her years. Because hatred is exhausting, and, eventually, even enemies must find common ground or face mutual destruction. My father taught me that. My guardian has shown me it's possible. Humans and Casterians were rivals once, yet here we stand. Marcus felt a surge of pride. 2 years ago, she'd hidden behind pillars. Now, she commanded rooms. The session concluded, and Liera made her way to him, some of the royal bearing dropping away to reveal the child underneath. Did I do okay? You did better than okay. Your father would be proud. Mama says we have a situation briefing after lunch. Is it about the precursor sites again? Marcus nodded, falling in his step beside her. Even within the palace, he never let his guard down completely. Too many servants, too many visiting dignitaries, too many opportunities for infiltration. The Zealothi have been pushing harder. 3 archaeological teams attacked in the last month. They're getting desperate, Liera observed. The war isn't going their way. She was right. The Zealothi's initial advantage, surprise, and overwhelming force had faded as the Federation mobilized. Now it was a grinding conflict of attrition, the kind where advanced technology mattered less than supply lines and political will. The precursor artifacts represented a potential game-changer, which made them increasingly valuable as the war dragged on. The briefing room was already occupied when they arrived. Queen Alara stood at the holographic display, surrounded by military advisors and intelligence officers. Also present was someone Marcus hadn't expected, Admiral Reyes, his former commanding officer. Sergeant Chun, Reyes nodded in greeting. Princess Liera, thank you for joining us. Admiral, Marcus replied, instantly alert. Reyes wouldn't be here for a routine briefing. What's the situation? Alara activated the display, showing a star map of the outer systems. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected an anomaly near the Castos Nebula. Spectral analysis suggests it's not natural. The image zoomed in, revealing a structure that made Marcus's breath catch. It was massive, easily the size of small moon, and clearly artificial. Geometric patterns covered its surface in arrangements that hurt to look at directly, as if the eye couldn't quite process the alien mathematics of its construction. Precursor, Liera breathed, moving closer to the display. It's really precursor technology. We believe so, Alara confirmed. Carbon dating from debris samples suggests it's over 1 million years old. And, more importantly, she manipulated the controls, overlaying star charts. Its location corresponds exactly to coordinates from our royal archives. Marcus understood immediately. The information passed down through generations of Casterian queens, the secret the Zealothi had killed to obtain. It was real, and now is active. The Zealothi know, he asked. 3 battle groups have already diverted toward the nebula, Admiral Reyes answered. We estimate they'll arrive within 48 hours. Federation forces are mobilizing, but they'll get there first, Marcus finished. What's our play? Alara and Reyes exchanged glances. That's why we're here, the Queen said slowly. The activation sequence for the structure requires a specific genetic marker, the Casterian royal bloodline, specifically the matrilineal line. The room fell silent. Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his stomach as the implications became clear. No, he said flatly. Absolutely not. Marcus, Alara began. You're talking about taking Liera into an active war zone, to a piece of technology we don't understand, with 3 Zealothi battle groups incoming. His voice rose despite himself. That's not a mission, it's suicide. We don't have a choice, Liera said quietly, and everyone turned to look at her. The 9-year-old princess stood straight, hands clasped behind her back in a posture Marcus recognized. He'd taught it to her. If we don't go, the Zealothi will try to break in by force. Who knows what damage they might cause? What if the structure has weapons? Defenses? What if breaking in triggers something worse? Liera, Marus. Her voice carried surprising authority. You taught me that sometimes we have to take calculated risks. That hiding from danger just lets it grow stronger. This is my responsibility. Your responsibility is to stay alive, Marcus countered. You're 9 years old. I'm the last of my line, she corrected. If something happens to Mama, I'm the only one who can access our archives, our history. This structure, it's not just about weapons or technology. It's about who we are, where we came from. She looked at her mother. Isn't it? Alara nodded slowly. The archives speak of the halls of memory, where our ancestors stored the sum of their knowledge before they fell. If even a fraction of that information survives. Medicine, Liera continued, her eyes bright. Science. History. Maybe even why the precursors disappeared. We can't let the Zealoty have it, and we can't risk it being destroyed. Marcus looked around the room, seeing the decision already made in their faces. He was outnumbered and outranked. More importantly, he could see the logic, even as every protective instinct screamed against it. Fine, he said finally, but we do this my way. Full combat team, multiple evacuation routes, and the second things go sideways, we abort. No heroics, no last stands. We get in, activate whatever needs activating, and get out. Agreed, Admiral Reyes said. I'm assigning the 7th Fleet to support. We'll keep the Zealoty busy while you work. And I'll be going as well, Alara announced, surprising no one. Where her daughter went into danger, the warrior queen followed. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus ran Liera through every combat drill they practiced, then invented new ones. He checked and rechecked equipment, coordinated with the Marine Special Operations team that would accompany them, and try not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Liera, for her part, threw herself into studying the archive materials. The ancient texts were written in an archaic form of Casterian that even translation software struggled with, but she persevered. Marcus found her asleep at her desk more than once, face pillowed on centuries-old star charts. You need actual rest, he told her the night before departure, physically carrying her to bed over her protests. Being exhausted won't help anyone. I almost have the activation sequence, she mumbled against his shoulder. The harmonics have to be perfect, or the structure won't recognize me as legitimate. It'll recognize you, Marcus said firmly. You're more royal than anyone I've ever met, regardless of bloodline. She smiled sleepily. You're just saying that because you like me. No, I'm saying it because it's true. The liking you part is just a bonus. As he settled her into bed, she caught his hand. Marcus? Are you scared? He considered lying, then decided against it. Terrified. But that's okay. Fear keeps us sharp, remember? I remember. She squeezed his fingers. I'm scared too, but not as scared as I'd be without you. The strike cruiser Perseverance departed at dawn, using experimental stealth technology to mask their approach to the nebula. Marcus stood on the bridge, watching the stars blur past while Liera sat in the navigator's position, her small form dwarfed by the chair, but her presence filling the space. Contact in T-4 hours, the helmsman reported. Zealoty forces are already engaging Federation pickets at the nebula's edge. Stay on course, Captain Torres commanded. She was new to Marcus, but came highly recommended, a veteran of the Proxima conflict who understood unconventional warfare. We punched through their lines fast and hard. No dilas. Marcus moved to Liera's station. How are you holding up? I've been reviewing the harmonics again, she said, showing him her tablet. The screen displayed wave patterns that seemed to shift and dance. The structure will test me, Marcus. Not just genetics, worthiness. I have to prove I deserve access. How do you prove worthiness to a million-year-old alien artifact? I don't know. Her admission was quiet. The archives are unclear. They speak of trials of mind and spirit, but the details... She shrugged helplessly. Then, we face it together, Marcus said. Whatever test it has, you won't face them alone. The first sign of battle came as distant flashes against the nebula's ethereal backdrop. The Federation's 7th Fleet was engaged in a massive holding action, hundreds of ships dancing through space in lethal choreography. The Perseverance's stealth systems held as they slipped past the main engagement, but Marcus knew they'd eventually be detected. There, Liera pointed at the main viewport. The structure, seeing it in person, was different from the holograms. The precursor facility seemed to exist partially outside normal space, its edges blurring in ways that made Marcus's head hurt. It was beautiful and terrible, a testament to engineering principles humanity couldn't begin to understand. Zealoty destroyer, bearing 27 Mark IV, the tactical officer announced.